So this is all fine and dandy if everything is going okay, but what happens if there's an error? So in the API client, if we get an error from the response where the response status is 401, then we're going to clear the query cache, log the user out, and refresh the page for them. We probably want to make sure that those things are happening in our tests. So let's add a test here to automatically logs the user out if a request returns a 401. Okay, and this is going to be an async test, and we'll do lots of the same things that we do in our first test here. So let's grab that, bring it on down, and we'll add a context status of 401 right there, so that this response sends back a 401 status code. So then this is going to reject, and there are a couple of assertions that you can use to verify that something rejects, or we could do a try catch or something, but my favorite way to handle errors for async await in this kind of a test is I add a .catch, and we'll take that error and we'll return the error, and that turns the promise into a resolved promise. And so now this result is going to be that error. So now I can expect the result message to match inline snapshot, and that will stick that error message right there. And I expect it to be this please re-authenticate, and we'll make sure that's what Jest puts in there. And then we also want to expect that the query cache is cleared and auth.logout is called. But we don't have control over those modules. We don't know what happens when those modules do that. So what I'm going to do instead is right up here at the top, we'll add a Jest mock of React query and Jest mock of auth provider. So that will turn all of the functions that those modules expose into Jest mock functions. And then I can come down here and make assertions that they're called. So we can expect the query cache clear to have been called times once. And it's not called with anything, so I don't need to assert what it's called with. And then we'll say auth.logout to have been called times once as well. It's also not called with anything, so I don't need to assert that. And it doesn't return anything either, so I don't need to mock the implementation. The last thing I need to do is import those modules because they're not doing a whole lot of good just sitting around like that. So we're grabbing the query cache from React query, and we'll grab auth from auth provider. And it looks like things are passing with flying colors. Let's make sure that they can fail. So what if we mistyped this and it was a 402 instead? Then great, yeah, we've failed our snapshot because it's not going to reject with this message. And even further, it's also not going to call either one of these methods. So that's looking pretty good. And let's make sure that if I don't log the user out, that's also going to fail my test. So in review, for this test, we basically did the same thing our first test did with the happy path. We just modified it for sending the status of 401, which indicates to the client that the user's making a request that they're not allowed to do, probably because their token is expired and they need to log in again. And so we make the request, which we know will fail, so we catch that, convert that promise from rejected to resolved by just returning the rejected value. We get that result, we verify the result message is please re-authenticate using toMatch inline snapshot, and then we verify that the query cache is cleared and auth logout is called.